right, we are on the top of the hour, and we should get ready to start. Welcome everyone to this afternoon session, this leadership panel that we have some great guests with us today, and I'd like to introduce all of them as well as our facilitator. We'll start with the very beautiful Maria Vasquez, who always looks so wonderful. Again, I'm so glad that the camera is working today and Maria is able to join us. Dr. Vasquez is the VP of Student Affairs, and welcome, Maria. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome Dr. Tom McDonald. He is the VP of Academic Affairs. We have with us Bill Owen, and Bill is the Associate VP for Strategic Initiatives. And we also have with us today the Associate Vice President for Human Resources, Melissa Beaver. And of course, to lead our discussion and to facilitate this session, we have the Dean of Student Experience and the Title III Grant Manager, James Cloyd. Take it away, James.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and get started here. This year, the 2020 has brought unprecedented changes to higher education due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Business as usual has been overturned, and institutions of education were faced with swifting systems, scheduling, and human capital to address moving conditions. Now, as we plan for our return to campus this fall, can we expect to ever return to business as usual? And so here's my first question. Can we expect to return to business as usual, and what has changed?
I'll take a stab at that one first. We've all been through a global pandemic, so I don't believe we are the same individuals or collective as before the pandemic. So I think, acknowledging the loss and the change that we experienced, and then really having that ongoing discussion around what that looks like with our teams. I think also just providing more grace and patience and kindness. And I think that will continue, leaning on each other for support. Also, regarding student services and support, there was such a quick shift that allowed us to reach levels of support that we had been discussing prior to the pandemic. So some of those include advising virtually, either by phone or virtually by Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And so I think that was something that, we will continue to do after we return back to campus to work.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just, I think just to add to what Maria is saying, it's a new brand of usual. So returning to business as usual is more about returning to whatever that new brand of usual is. And there were some things we learned out of the pandemic that we can apply to that new usual going forward. She mentioned virtual advising, but the live Zoom classes that we did during the pandemic were, are really kind of a nice in-between for the student who maybe doesn't necessarily thrive in the asynchronous online environment, but maybe wants that convenience of remote learning. And then there are also the brand of student who still wants the in-person learning, and we are going to be doing more of that this fall. So it's a new brand of normal.
James, I'd like to add from a human capital or human resources perspective, I think this is 15 to 18 months, has caused a lot of people to challenge their priorities in life and kind of re-examine what's important to them, not only in what they do, but where they work and what that looks like. And so I think returning is going to bring with it some different expectations that people probably didn't have 18 months ago in their relationship to work, and what that's going to cause employers to now have to think about in order to attract and retain people.
And I'll throw in, James, just briefly that, all of us talked prior to this panel today, and we all acknowledge, where we're at is a microcosm of what's happened across the world, and it's really interesting and great that we have people from around the world and across the country here today, because that perspective, the perspective we're sharing is just what we experience. But for me, it really was bigger than like business as usual and will we return and what has changed. I think everything has changed. I think people have changed, and I saw things I never had experienced before when our society in general riled against things like the use of the word, it wasn't a stay-at-home request we experienced. It was a stay-at-home order. And it wasn't a mass suggestion, it was a mass mandate. And people really reacted strongly to that. And I think that's something we'll learn on our college campuses going forward is how things are presented to people and where they're getting their information from makes a big difference to what our collective experience is.
Great point. Thank you, Bill. I'll move on to the second question. What are the longer term leadership implications of this changed environment?
I'll take a first swing, and then I know others will want to chime in too. I keep hearing our president talk about this like next 10-year window, that there's a real, at least again, in our experience in this country, that there's we may be at a tipping point in community colleges, and at a very exciting time, because again, finding those quick wins, those short-term kinds of certifications, credentials to help get a workforce back working again. There are lots of opportunities here, so I think we have to be as nimble and agile as we've ever been before. And I think be willing to take a critical look at maybe some of the things that aren't working as well, and putting our energy and our efforts behind the things that are, because the funding, our revenue streams, our revenue sources are maybe not as plentiful as they used to be. So I think being real strategic about how we move forward as an institution and really capitalize on the things that we can do to make our student experience better is it's just a lot of it for me.
Also, I think that using the term that I've been hearing more of lately is that holistic student, the holistic student supports. And we've known, before the pandemic that there were food insecurity and mental health wellness challenges. And I think that long term, we're going to more likely look at the entire student, the whole student, and looking at the food insecurity, the childcare issue, housing issues. Again, those challenges existed before, but now it's apparent that we must address those. If we're looking at the academic needs of a student, we must look at the whole student.
I'd say the other thing is leaders, and I know many of you listening and participating today are leaders or are moving to leadership roles. One of the things we learned as leaders, and I think was part of our shared experience, is we learned more than ever that we had to listen. This was not a planned scenario we were going through. So the implications for the future are planning for the unplanned. And one of the things we really had to do carefully was listen to the experts, not think we knew it all. And in this case, listening to the health experts seemed to be like a really smart thing to do, and not implementing our own best practices, but implementing best practices that were pretty well generally accepted. So I think that planning for the unplanned, which is almost impossible, takes a lot of resources beyond oneself. And so your colleagues, the experts in the field throughout the country and other places, this was a situation where that was absolutely necessary. And as complex as the world has become, I would say that future scenarios will require the same thing, careful and thoughtful listening.
Mm-hmm. Bill, and your answer kind of segues into the next question, which is, how will leaders need to operate going forward? Are there other perspectives on things that we may need to look at as far as our leaders operating as we move forward?
Well, I'll just jump in quick and then I'll be done kind of, since you said I was tagging on to that last one there. I think we all have to, as leaders, have to be more tuned in to what's going on around the country, what's happening outside our environment as well as inside, because there's implications. And then as a leader, what I need more than anything these days is a noise filter. It's so difficult to know what you should really be paying attention to and what's the latest coming fad that, went viral on the internet that we can ignore. So I don't have the answer for that, but that's some of the implications I see from a leadership position.
I think that this pandemic highlighted certainly many strengths and opportunities to strengthen, for example, communication. These folks on the panel, my colleagues, and I have a very good relationship, but that relationship didn't develop during the crisis. It really was strong prior to. So I think that communicating in a timely manner, and I reflect back to March of 2020, things were changing rapidly, hour by hour, day to day. And I think that communication, although certainly we could have improved, I think that's something that we really tried to share with folks so that people knew where we were and what we were doing. Tom and I quickly learned that a unified message, both to the academic affairs folks and student affairs folks, worked best, so that we didn't say different parts of a message that could be interpreted differently. So I think communication is always something that we can continue to improve on. But those relationships, I think, is what we relied highly and worked together as a group.
I think we've done a really good job at our institution of being more data informed. We've got more metrics and numbers and data points to look at. But I think being able to make sense of it all and actually understand what that data is telling us, so that we can be making more data informed decisions that come from a good place, I think that'll be important going forward too.
Okay, thank you. Leaders find themselves having to make decisions in the face of so much uncertainty and often with little information. How has the complexity in the face of rapidly changing data, conditions, and information increased the challenge of leading during this time?
I can start that one off a little bit from my perspective. I kind of look at it in the sense as our playbook has changed a little bit. Like someone's taken the playbook that we had and we have to rewrite it. And so there's no playbook to go from. So we're writing it as we go, as some of us have already said. And I think what will be pivotal is that we start to look at what is good enough, like the 80% rule of not having, because the data is changing, circumstances are changing constantly. It's being able to be okay with what's good enough, and whether that's the 80% rule, and not having to have all the answers before we go forward, and trust that we're all working in the same direction and that the decision is good enough with the information that we have.
I think President Smeza would be pretty pleased with that analogy, the sports analogy there.
that wasn't actually for that reason, but that was my best analogy at the time.
Well done.
Survey the field and call an audible when needed, right?
I think we can't lose sight of the idea that leading is about people, and it implies some sort of future focus. So you're not. I'm not going to be an effective leader if I'm saying, well, I've been here 20 years and I've got this great past. I've got to have some kind of future focus. And the best we could do in a situation like this pandemic is really rally and respond to the best information we have. And then you try to assure people, if you follow me or if you follow us, whoever the leader is, you're going to be okay. That doesn't mean, you're the autocratic, do what I say sort of leader. It means you've tried to filter all that information and all that data and get the absolute best information you can and be transparent with it and be forthright and be honest, and people trust you're going to do that. Then they're more often willing to follow, and you have can maintain some sense of order regardless of what the situation is.
I think what you said there, Bill, that transparency and honesty is critical. And then knowing, if we didn't know something, I think it was also very transparent and critical that we share that we just didn't know. We don't know what that looks like, or we don't know what next week might bring. We're operating on today's facts. So again, it's a collective, it was a collective process and decision making.
I like to joke with my colleagues that there are two words at our institution that have no meaning. One is temporary and the other one's permanent. And I probably want to add a third word to that, and that's done. Done is never done, I think, and that's going to be true going forward as well. Done does not mean completed, finished. It just means we need to, I think we need to be willing to try things, implement things, and be ready to change or adjust those things rather than trying to get it perfect. That's another one of my favorite sayings that I've heard in our assessment academy work that we're doing is done is better than perfect. So get something done and then adjust it later. It's that idea of the iPhone has come in different iterations. It's version 1, and then it was version 2, and then 3 and 4 and 5 and so on. And that's how I think that's how we see ourselves going forward as well.
Very good. Okay, I'll move on to the next question here. Digital is not just online learning. How can educational leaders understand the role of a college or university in a new digital society? And then part 2 of that question is, how does the technology facilitate the objectives of the institution and lead to an evolved learning environment and community?
I'll respond to that. I think we also quickly learned that there was a divide in those that had the digital or the technology and those that did not, both with our students and also our staff. So I think that the fact that we quickly shifted into focusing on a laptop loan and hotspot distribution, was important for us. We knew that early on that we needed to do that. In fact, we had talked about that back in 2017 when a new building at the Fort Omaha campus was built, our Career and Academic Skills Center. That was the vision of a laptop loan program. And also, I think the professional development that was quickly put in place. I think we had existing like a library of professional development, but there were tailored technology training, tailored for advising, tailored for student services, as well as, of course, the training for faculty.
I mentioned having to listen. This is one of the areas where I really have to listen because I'm not a digital native. And I didn't grow up with all this technology, and I try to understand it. And I sometimes get caught up, as others do, that, instant answers on the internet are not learning. They're instant answers on the internet. And I can tell in a conversation with any of you, if you read the Yahoo News, because I read the Yahoo News. And so we know the same headlines and little else beyond the headlines, unless we've studied or looked something up. So I have to listen and understand how we can use this kind of technology to really not just be providing 24/7 stimuli, but be providing tools that students can use to learn from. And I know some of our classroom instructors and some of our technology folks are very, very good at that. And they see their role and they understand their role. But as I said, I see the issues that it creates, and helping students separate what true thinking is. I sometimes jokingly, when somebody's looking for an answer for something and I'm in a leadership position, they want an answer, and I say, well, we'll give it the 24-hour rule. And I won't answer them for 24 hours because I need time to think and process. And I really think that's a place where some of us could learn more. And like I said, made me think of that listening piece, that as leaders, we need to learn the things that are among us right now that maybe weren't part of the world before.
I think those are great answers. And, from a testing services perspective, supervising testing services, one of the things that the technicians learned is that, as Tom said, let's just get it done first. So we first of all had to just learn how to proctor one test in Zoom. And then once we got that done and was proficient at that, then we were able to say, okay, can we proctor maybe 2, 3, 4 students at the same time? And so it kind of goes back to the heart of that question, is that it's digital is not just online learning. It's also those online services and online supports that we may be able to provide to students as well.
Good point.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the next question then here. While a universally accepted objective, we tend to struggle with the actualization of a superior student experience, more so with COVID in the mix. A quality experience involves connecting and engaging students at multiple levels, to each other, to academics, to industry, to the institution, and to the broader community. What can leaders do to facilitate and leverage these connections, including understanding how the digital environment enhances the student experience?
Well, again, I think some of the things we've talked about already, that idea of recognizing those early signs, because the intervention, in terms of aiding the student experience or improving the student experience, that early intervention is such I think a critical point. And so, we have multiple programs that we're looking at in order to do that intervention early, and make sure that we are catching those students at an early point in their academic career. And as soon as one of those metrics triggers, I think that's when you have to get in and quickly, diagnose and provide support as needed, whether it's attendance issues or an assignment that didn't get turned in or got turned in late, or it's number of credit hours attempted, or whatever the metric is that we're looking at, is really look at that data and make sure that we're providing the interventions that we need in order to, again, improve that student experience overall.
What also occurred early March or later in March of 2020 was phone calls that advisors and navigators and other staff reached out to their caseload of students and, how are you doing? How's your well-being? These are the services that we have now. And as we added more services, those services were also extended to students. But, I was very proud of the quick action that was taken, particular advisors and navigators, to really check in with the students. How are you doing? How can I help? And then making sure that they were connecting with the services that we have for them.
The thing I'll throw in here too is understanding the student experience becomes more and more difficult as our students become more and more diverse. I only have one background. The one advantage I had is quite a few years ago, I was a student at Metropolitan Community College. So at least I understand what the student experience was. One of the things I think we can do as leaders is hire people who understand the student experience, who've had it, who've been close to it, have attended community college if you're at a community college, or a university like yours if you're at a university. I think that's important. And then you mentioned the community and industry, and how does the institution connect, and how do we provide that great experience? And I like the analogy of sometimes if someone tells you you're an anchor, that doesn't sound like a good thing. But if your college is an anchor, that's a good thing. That means you're there in the community, people can count on you, you'll always be there, you're rock solid, et cetera. So as an institution, I would inspire us to strive to not only be an anchor, but to be a sail. So an anchor for the community, for the industry, for the employer, and a sail for our students to give them what they need to launch in this new world and new environment.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is open it up and take a few questions from our participants as well. So Nina, do we have some questions in the in the
Oh,
chat?
yeah, we've got tons of questions coming in. So
Okay.
thanks, James, for bringing that up. One of the questions that came in really is students will certainly be the driving force of lasting policy change. But if students continue to demand remote learning and remote advising opportunities, what impact do you think this will have on our workforce? Do you see continued opportunities to work remotely? Missy, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I can. So I do see the opportunity for remote work to be much more present than it was pre-COVID, provided we've got the appropriate, monitoring and measurements in place to ensure that we're still meeting the needs of the students. And so it's a true assessment of what roles and responsibilities are conducive to that work arrangement. But absolutely, I think in order to be able to meet the needs of the students that are in that space, we're going to definitely have to figure out how we get there so that we can continue to meet them where they are.
James, do we want to go to the next question that's come in?
Yeah, let's do one more and then I can go back to the questions I have here.
Right. Again, I think that a lot of questions around that work, and I think, Missy, this is kind of a follow-up to what you just said about assessing and sort of making sure there are systems in place. The question follow-up is, it seems to be that, this whole year there was, especially in the advising community among advisors and staff that worked at home, a question of trust. And, the fact that we're talking about a hybrid work model, what does that look like for MCC staff? And I have several questions that have come in also privately through other means, not just the Zoom. But they're asking questions like, how do you increase productivity and trust between employers and supervisors while still offering this hybrid work model? Good question.
You want me to take that, Maria? Do you want to chime in from? I'm happy to take it, but I don't know if you wanted to speak in from the advising perspective.
Go ahead, Missy.
Okay. What I think the question is how can we set up a model to which trust and productivity are still at the forefront? Is that a safe rephrasing of that question, Nina?
Absolutely.
Okay. We've talked a lot about the importance of leadership on today's panel and making sure that we have, solid foundation relationships with our employees. A lot of what we've talked about today is, being student-centric, but it's really, I think Bill said, leadership is people, and providing services to students is all about the people. So it's really important that our leaders understand what makes our employees, what motivates them, and really being in tune with what they need from the employment experience. So building that trust is absolutely critical in order to foster that relationship of productivity, whether it be on site or remote. So that's first, and we've talked about a lot of things, communication and just knowing the members of your team. The other thing too is how to ensure productivity. I've talked to Maria enough to know that there's systems in place currently to where we can track, how many students are served in a given period of time, whether it be through the day or through the week. And, provided that system is still in place to where the leaders can monitor and ensure that the students are being serviced in the model that we have set up, is all the more reason why it can be successful. So it's trust in that relationship between leaders and the employees, and then just knowing what our service model needs to look like and the quantity and quality of that service model to ensure that we're continuing to reach the students. It just continues to need to be fostered and looked at.
Well said, Missy. Thank you. And I think it is about trust, but more importantly, I think it is about making sure that our teams have the equipment that they need. We moved very quickly and have been doing this work now for over a year, but we early on found out that, some of our staff needed laptops and hotspots. And so the equipment exists, as you mentioned, Missy, like the monitoring equipment, but we haven't necessarily put all of the equipment in place for our staff to succeed. So I think it's a pause moment to what have we learned, what worked, what do we still need to make sure that our staff have as far as supports, whether that's technology or otherwise. And I think it's obviously something that we're moving towards is a hybrid model.
I agree with, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Tom.
I agree with everything that's been said. I also, just a quick observation, about a week or so ago, I had the first back to campus in-person meeting with my immediate reports. And the dynamic of a live meeting, of in-person interaction, is palpable. You can feel it. There was no, oh, Maria, you're on mute. Oh, James, I'm sorry, I stepped on you. It's just like the dynamic is so much different. And so, to think that we would ever be in a mode where, people get to exclusively work from home and never come back to work, I think that's just not real. There's that certain amount of engagement that we're going to need. So it is a hybrid model. And people are going to be asked, I think, to do both. They're going to be asked to do, work with students remotely because that's what students need. And there will also need that in-person interaction, whether it's student to student or student to instructor or advisor or, colleague to colleague, whatever it is. There will be times when, your presence on campus is absolutely needed.
That's a great point. And Maria brought up a good point regarding the equipment and things like that. I just know when a staff member has a Surface Pro or something like that, and they're connecting to a docking station at work, it's pretty easy to get your work done. But when you don't have that docking station at home and you're trying to spend 8 hours in front of a 10-inch, maybe sometimes 8-inch screen, that becomes a little bit difficult.
Right. So. And again, I think I mentioned in 2017 with one of the new buildings, the Career and Academic Skills Center, that was by design, that it's a flexible space, and staff are flexible with their docking stations, their laptops, even the phone system or texting. I mean, all of that, whether it was Google Voice or otherwise, is another example of we were thinking that way. And I think that certainly propelled us to better understand, the laptop or docking station is something that we need to move forward with, instead of the desktop. And so those are things that I think we also learned, but I think we were forward thinking in that development back in 2017.
Mm-hmm. James, there's one more question I want to just throw in here because it kind of connects with all of this, is how will leadership navigate change burnout? It seems that there has been a lot of pivoting and not a lot of time to settle. And national statistics are also showing advisor attrition. We're seeing a faculty attrition as well. I had 1 or 2 comments come in from outside of America that says, they're struggling to retain staff, not just students.
Well, maybe I'll add, and maybe Missy may have a perspective, but Missy, you talked about human capital, and even like in the restaurant and hotel industry, we're seeing a lot of employees that are not returning to work because they've reevaluated their priorities. So are we experiencing some of that?
It's a great question. I think they've deemed it like the Great Resignation or something like that. I've been reading because people have, like we've said, examined their priorities. And, I'm still relatively new to the college. However, I know enough that this time of year is when we naturally start to see attrition from just a retirement perspective. And so we do track turnover, and we're starting to see, we have seen some, I would say, attrition due to maybe fatigue due to the last 18 months, but not a lot. And I think that's largely due to the fact that MCC really did, I feel, step up and show a lot of support for our employees over the last 18 months and showed a ton of flexibility and grace and support through it all, and tried really to communicate every phase of what we were thinking and feeling and deciding through it all. So I do think that contributes to the fact that we haven't experienced a lot of turnover due necessarily to the pandemic. But we need to continue to figure out what we need to do to keep it that way, because I think, you know, as people continue to examine what's important to them, their needs have changed. I mean, their expectations with work have definitely changed.
Else? Okay, I'll move on to the next question. How can we develop the capacity to challenge the traditional business or operating model at the departmental, advising, faculty, and college level?
So I thought of a quote and had to go look it up because I couldn't recall it. But when I read this question, and we're challenging the traditional model, I thought of Stephen Covey's work and his authorship in business and education. He's a teacher as well as a business person. And his quote was, "Seek first to understand and then to be understood." And I think that's important when we want to challenge any existing system. I think we should understand the inner workings of that system before we decide we've got something that would make a better replacement for it. You know, I'm in favor of work from home, but not for the sake of working from home. I'm in the favor of it when we talk about things like increasing productivity and workforce capability, better service to students, better use of taxpayers' money. If we can make the case for something like that, that will resonate with leaders, not just leaders at the college. It doesn't really make that much difference, what I think. But when you have an elected board of officials who are responsible for the taxpayers' money, and you turn to them and say, our whole workforce is home and all our buildings are sitting empty, that's going to be a really tough sell. But if we can talk to them about productivity and we can talk to them about service to students, that when I have the conversation with people, I would like them to promise me they're not going to say work from home, and I'm not going to think it when they're talking, because we're going to talk about productivity and efficiency and modern use of technology and really serving our students in the modern age in the way they need to be served and so forth. And if we can do all that, if I can understand that, and they seek to understand the perspective of not just leaders, but who those leaders are accountable to, I think we can make some progress there on that front and address everyone's concerns. And I think people have misinterpreted what they heard as a trust issue. It isn't about trust. It's about experiencing the unknown and be able to assure people that we're being a responsible institution. We're doing what needs to be done beyond someone's individual job. So that's a lot to say. You know, we've got to work these things through and talk about them. And yes, there has to be trust, and we have to understand one another and what the other conditions are that people are faced with. The best example I had, you know, I don't know what it's like to have little kids at home anymore, but I did at one time. And I can't imagine what it was like for somebody going through this pandemic with the kids out of school and having to work, and work from home was a great solution. You know, I know several people at the college that are single parents, and all this was thrust upon them at one time. I think there's a lot we can learn from that. And when I say seek to understand, it goes both ways. So that's where I'll leave that line of thinking anyway.
And I think what you said too about if we put students first, you know, in anything that we, you know, decide, discuss, revisit, you know, how are we serving students? I think that we can't go wrong if we always put students first.
The only thing I would add is remember to always communicate the why. Why are we looking at challenging the traditional business or operating model? It's because the traditional business and operating model is not giving us the results we think we should be getting as an institution. And so, you know, let's make sure that people understand that before we implement change.
Anyone else? Well, if anyone knows the Cloyd boys, they're pretty good kids, but I tell you, there's no way I could have worked from home when they were, 7 and 9 years old. It just wouldn't have happened. And so definitely that's something that was a challenge for many of our staff. And Bill, as you said, at the end of the day, productivity. Are we able to serve students in the same capacity or better capacity when we're working from home? I was fortunate to see the transformation of our testing technicians, and there were problems that we had to solve over this last year, and not because it was going to make our job easier, because we were attempting to solve those problems because we were attempting to try to serve students better and try to eliminate the challenges and some of the discomforts that they had with remote services and things like that. And it was really, great to see our staff, rise to the occasion and problem solve challenges in a way to better serve our students.
Mhm.
We're almost at 2:55. Are there any other additional questions in the chat, Nina?
Yes, I do want to just highlight that chat message that came in from Corey. I think that what he said is that, no one is asking for an all work from home model, but it is that recognizing mental health issues of our coworkers is a facet of putting students first as well. And well noted, Corey. It's a very good point. And burnout is real. And yes, the struggle is real. And I think in one of the previous sessions, I think it was Dr. Alexander who said, we all went through the COVID, not just the students. And so maybe that came across in as a trust issue, but I think it's a larger discussion about mental health as well. Right. And I think there's another question that came in talking about, and I think, Bill, this one's for you. As colleges around the world struggle with enrollment, and and with numbers, how do you see the change or the college pivoting to improve enrollment numbers while still keeping mental health of our staff, our frontline staff, at the forefront?
Well, the community college enrollment decline is not unique to any one community college. That's pretty much that's what's happening across the nation. And part of that is that some of the jobs that we prepared students for are now available to them in the workforce without a college education or without a 2-year degree. They can step into those jobs through other methods. So first and foremost, what we really need to pay attention to is what we're offering, what the student base wants or needs. And, it's the scariest thought for us all is that the ticket into the workforce and into advancement in career and so forth doesn't come through your community college or your university. It comes through some other model, and then we're going to all be out of work. So we have to really take a look at what are we delivering and what do our students need and how are we delivering it? And that's not something you solve in an afternoon session. That's a long, hard look, which I believe our college is taking as we talk about the student experience and the student path forward and so forth. My first career for as many years almost as I've been in education, I was in manufacturing. And our adage in manufacturing, a lot of people, when you talk about education, they don't like to hear business models. But the business model is still there, that if you have no enrollment, you have no educational institution. It's a fact of life. And so in the manufacturing environment, we strive for 3 things: low cost, high quality, and delivered quickly, or high speed. Low cost, high quality, and quickly. Now, if you think about your favorite restaurant experience, most people are looking for low cost, high quality, and delivered quickly. And if you take that consumer experience into the college experience and you say, what's the student looking for? Low cost education, high quality, and delivered quickly. The problem is you can only choose 2. So which 2 are you going to choose? And if you're going to choose low cost and quickly, you're going to sacrifice quality. So So that's where it really begins, is keeping our eye on what it is we have to deliver, how we're delivering it, what the return is for the student, and having these difficult conversations that we have about how we have to shift to meet students' needs. And if we don't, enrollments will continue to decline.
Mhm.
I want to go back to an earlier comment about mental health and putting students first. That does not mean, I think I said that we need to make sure to put students first in any decisions that we make. They're the priority. I didn't mean to say they are the only priority. It is not either or. You know, mental health for our students, for example, is equally important that we focus on mental health for our staff and our faculty. So it's not either or, it is and.
Mhm.
And making sure that we take care and check in on each other, I think has been something that I've also seen throughout the year and a half. But we need to continue to do that. It isn't or, it is and.
Well noted.
Maria, thank you for circling back on that. I was going to circle back on that as well. I was really, appreciative of some of the staff development and training that we had as we were gearing up to come back, with Melissa Copeland and some of the other things that was offered through professional development, especially the one that talked about just, self-care and how we're going to deal with our own triggers and things like that. And so I think that is important that the institution recognize that we are still healing ourselves as other folks are healing. And it's important that we recognize maybe some triggers we may have. For one, it may not have bothered you in the past if someone was going to cough without covering their mouth. But in today's age, with everything that's going on, you might, you take offense to that or feel some way about that simply because we know that that's one way that the virus could spread. So I think we just have to continue to be mindful of those things as we move forward.
Point well taken.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to go on to another question here, then we'll see if there's any more final questions before we wrap up here. Thinking back, with the fall in our purview, what is one rose, thorn, and banana to consider?
I'd like to address the rose and the thorn, both from the perspective as I saw a couple comments on online classes. And like I said, and couple that with a comment about enrollment. Could we grow enrollment by just like getting out there on the national scene with some big ads and with some flashy spots and with a low cost tuition that we could spread across the nation and grow enrollment? We could, but we're funded by the taxpayers in the state of Nebraska. And in the state of Nebraska, we're actually, by legislation, we're actually here to serve 4 counties within the state of Nebraska. So even if enrollment is suffering, do we then try to launch some sort of nationwide or worldwide program? And so forth. So far, we've said as a college, we're going to do some of that, but we're going to focus on our 4 county service area and really try to give the best service we can possibly provide to students who need that education, whether it be online or whether it be face-to-face. But I really agree that taking advantage of online for our existing student body and for those who can't make it to campus is important growth potential for us.
I'll go next with my rose, thorn, and banana. So I think the rose for me was the urgency of implementing the systems of support and that action that we took to meet the need of our students, staff, and faculty, and also the collaboration of the teams across the college. I think I've mentioned that already, but there was an urgency and a behavior shift that for me was like, aha, we can do this quickly. We can move away from paper and signatures to more of an automated process. So it is doable. We can do this. The thorn would be the emotional toll, obviously, on our students, staff, and faculty. It's been a long and lengthy crisis, and it's not over yet. So just that emotional, mental health, the grieving and the loss of the pandemic, and certainly will continue to grieve. And then the banana, you know, we know our students have needs, and we have services. And I think that slippery slope of needing to maybe address how we can make those connections stronger or more, or quicker. So we were part of a hope survey that took a look at, what students, some of their needs, right? And we learned, of course, that there were food insecurity and housing and those sorts of things. But about 50 or almost 50% of the students that completed the survey didn't know about the services that we offered. And of those that did know, they didn't think that they thought that there were other students that were needier. And so how do we normalize asking for assistance? How do we make sure that we're making those connections for students, staff, and faculty? So that, I think, is something that, we will continue to try to figure out, whether it is faculty information, whether it's texting, whether we heard from a person yesterday from the Hope Center and offered many great suggestions. But for me, that is something that keeps me up at night, is we have the services. How do we make sure that our faculty and staff, that our students know about the service?
Any other comments? I should add that, banana is just, something that's tricky.
Yes, I got some questions about what's the banana?
Oh, I thought you did ask that, James. Or you?
Yeah, no, you did. I was just clarifying for our participants.
We do have a few more questions. We have about 10 minutes, and Tom, this one's for you actually. So the question is, we have another one. Okay, but I'll get to that. But
Kohl, the jacket's from Kohl's, if anybody was asking that, just saying.
Yeah, we're not letting you off that easy. So, so this is the question. So they're asking, this is again, not from our college, but this is from, although somebody from our college also asked the same thing. They're asking, they're seeing quite a lot of students of color drop during the pandemic. As a result of the pandemic, now as they're going back, those students are not coming back. And we really tried this conference to bring in speakers and sessions that addressed diversity issues and equity issues. So if attendees notice that most of our sessions were geared towards what can we do better? The question is, what has Metro done or is planning to do to bridge this equity gap in the classroom as well?
I think, well, first of all, it is that would be my thorn. If I was going to do the rose, thorn, and banana, that's the thorn. Because yeah, we see the same thing. We have seen, those outcomes metrics are not as strong for our students of color, and quite frankly, our African American males are really in a kind of a crisis area in terms of those different measures and outcomes. And so we talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and doing our, Bill's got the Path Forward background up, and Path Forward is our student success and completion initiative here at the college. And so we talk about doing these things with an equity lens, or looking through that equity lens. So that really does mean, maybe it's providing additional supports for our students of color so that we can see, equitable outcomes across all different, student populations and demographics. So we are looking, we really are looking with intentionality at students of color. We have existing programs in place, such as our TRIO program, which, again, deals with those first generation college students who have no, they have no support network at home because they're the first in their family to go to college. So they need those additional supports. It's, I think it's just a matter of trying to identify what those pain points are, what those barriers are, and making sure that we're diverting the support, especially to our students of color who may be experiencing more of those barriers, more of those hardships. And that's, to me, what equity truly means, is getting the help where it needs to go, meeting students where they are. So yeah, there's a number of different things that we're doing, I think, that are able to address the equity gap. Maria talked about the digital divide, but there's also, I think just in terms of just academic support, there's also some of those gaps are there and present, and we need to be able to address those as well.
So I'll throw in a couple of things specific that we have done since the beginning of the pandemic. And Tom mentioned, one of the hardest hit populations, African American males, who have not been represented in a number at the college, and those doing well. They've been those who have struggled. So, we don't then go out and try to recruit or fix problems specific to African American males. But many of the programs we put forward are of benefit to those in that description pool, if you will. So the free tuition program that we offered to all area high schools was there for students who may not have the income level, or who parents may not have to get them started at the college, and that population could be represented there. The scholarships and the non-credit workforce Pell sort of programs we put together for job training, again, underrepresented populations, whether they're one specific one or a broader swath represented within that group. For anyone who incurred a debt with the college since the beginning of the pandemic, we forgave that debt. So if you started at Metro and you got off to a bad start and you had to withdraw because this pandemic came along and you owe the college money, you're not going to get started again. So that could be lower income people, could be people that were, impacted by the pandemic that now can't pay their bills. So we forgave that debt. One of the things sometimes not understood, and when I said seek to understand, you can't really profile in the state of Nebraska anyway by ethnicity. You can't say we're creating a scholarship just for African American men. It's not legal by state statute. So when you consider that African American men who have struggled at the college are often among these other demographics that we're talking about, you can do that. You can create programs that will help those most in need. And that's where, the one thing I would say our institution has done that others haven't is this recovery money that the federal government has granted us. We've turned around, we didn't put it in the institutional coffers for a rainy day. We've turned around and created programs for students in need and opportunities for students in need. So that's one of the things I would say, those are tangible things that Tom was talking about that we are doing and will continue to do.
I'd throw in there too, our Avenue Scholars, which is a local foundation here in Omaha that works with high school kids and younger. And so career exploration opportunities with Avenue Scholars, the North Star Foundation, summer step-up programs that we're doing, those are all opportunities to engage students who may not have college in mind down the road, but we're at least planting that seed at an early age.
I think there's a follow-up question here, and Bill, thank you for that. Response. And I think one of the follow-up question is, we understand that there are, many ways in which maybe our hands are tied in supporting certain populations because of, the way the state is arranged, but they're asking, what about in the classroom? What can faculty do to support equity within the classroom?
And I'll let Tom, as Vice President of Academic Affairs, talk about that before I throw in, or if I throw in.
We have 1 more minute and then we got to wrap up here.
I'll do the short answer, and we can certainly talk about this at length, maybe at a later date. But I think we have to be intentional about recruiting diverse faculty, not only in terms of race and gender and ethnic background, but just lived experiences, so that we have those lived experiences represented in our classroom, that they are valued, so that when a student comes to class, the message resonates with students from all manner of backgrounds, lived experiences, race, gender, ethnicity. The whole message is, from the instructor, resonates with all students in the class. I think that's really, really important that lived experience is there. And I think we're working hard to make sure our faculty represent the diverse backgrounds that our students come from.
I think one of the sessions we did yesterday was, to do with curriculum, how we can get curriculum to represent our students. And it was a really meaningful session by Primrose. So that was quite good.
I will say we've got a really great series going on even this summer for a group of faculty that's, about culturally responsive teaching and teaching.
I was hoping you would say that.
A lens. And so, yeah, all of those things help. Absolutely.
Yeah. We're on our hour now, James.
Yep. To be respectful, I'll go ahead and add a closing comment here. Colleges and universities will be key to a society recovering from the coronavirus pandemic. Not only will research and education contribute to the health, but also to the economic and social recovery in the world. The coronavirus will not last forever, but the long-term implications will be significant. At all levels of higher education, new leadership skills have been gained and additional skills will be required for the future. Thank you.
Thank
you to a wonderful panel, wonderful session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.